But as I mentioned, we'll start with Kevin Cramer and Senator John Hoeven, and we'll talk a little bit about the Farm Bill and how these folks are going to work together, and look forward to that very much. Without any further ado, we'll give him a chance to have a sip of water, though. No, you don't need those headphones. You can just pull right. You've done this drill before. You've seen this movie. How are you, Congressman?
I'm very good. Thank you, Scott. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you. I'm going to take a sip of water while you talk.
It's a nice tie that your wife bought you.
How do you know so much about me?
I don't know.
Who bought yours?
Yeah, well, actually, I don't think your wife bought me that one, but she has bought me a couple of nice ones.
I think she sent you during a campaign or two.
She did.
It was a good luck charm, right?
Not just that, but I looked so darn good in them.
Yeah, and she's bought Karl Rove a couple.
Yeah,
Dean Blaze.
Somebody ought to.
She's good at picking out ties, but I married well. So did you.
Yeah, way up.
Way up. Yeah, exactly. So
we just had this little Ag Bill round table that Senator Hoeven hosted, and Senator Heitkamp and I were able to tag on to with a number of the commodity groups and the farm groups, Farm Bureau, Farmers Union, corn growers, soybean growers, grain growers, corn or sugar growers, canola, the usual group of folks that are concerned about the future of agriculture from a policy standpoint.
What's the big question from them?
Well, it's interesting because the big question is: are we going to get one? Are we going to get a 5-year bill that provides the safety net and provides the certainty that, of course, farmers, and probably as important as anything, although it didn't come up, but that the bankers can be confident in? And given the political climate, given the budget climate, of course, there's some concern about that. And so really it was an opportunity for Senator Hoeven to go through the 2012 bill that passed the Senate. We went into some of the details of the differences with the House 2012 House bill that did not pass the House. It didn't get voted on the floor, but it did pass the House Ag Committee overwhelmingly, bipartisan support. Where are we going from here? And I think it was a good opportunity for us as members of the North Dakota delegation to provide some assurance to the groups that I think you'll see a farm bill up this go around, hopefully through regular order, that will look a lot like the Senate bill did last year. The House version will look a lot like the House Ag bill did. They'll get to a conference committee and reconciled. But we also are dealing with it in the context of sequestration, continuing resolution, and those things.
Now, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, there is.
But first of all, the big question: are we going to get one? And
yes,
and that's just something I think the entire economy is starving for. And you've been talking about this for a long time. Give me a roadmap, right?
We will have one. I would be very surprised if we don't have a farm bill. I'm quite certain the Senate will pass one similar to what they did last year. Might even have, as Senator Hoeven's talking, and you'll talk to him later, I think, but he's talking about maybe even a little more momentum if they make a few tweaks that will satisfy some of the southern members of the Senate Ag Committee that voted against last year's. On the House side, Frank Lucas, the chairman of the House Ag Committee, told me just last Friday he feels quite comfortable that we'll have a bill that'll look a lot like the one that passed the Ag Committee last go around. Largely, while there's a new Congress, it's largely the same makeup, a lot of the same players. So we feel like we have that momentum. And on the House bill last go around, there was $16 billion more in savings than in the Senate version. But all of those additional savings came out of the food stamp program, a program that has grown by 50% just in the last 5 years. So, there's pretty good confidence that we'll have that. We also have what I think is to our advantage. We have a presidential election behind us. It is not an election year. I think a non-election year is a better year to bring up 5-year programs than election years, frankly. And so you have that. You also have that sense of urgency that I think creates some momentum. Now, we're going to have the constraint of the budget situation. We have a $16.5 trillion debt and growing.
Well, this is what I want to talk about as well. Can we afford one? Mm-hmm. And do we need one anymore?
Well,
in other words, a perfect world,
sure,
you want a farm bill, you want to level the playing field, but can we afford one?
Well, we can afford a farm bill because the bill that passed last session, the bill that passed the House Ag Committee last session, already fits the framework of the Ryan budget, because there are so many savings in it. So really, in many respects, the Farm Bill should be the leader in how you get to a balanced budget in the long run. But let's remember, and we'll put it in the context of sequestration. Sequestration.
We should explain what the heck that is. It's the dumbest word in the world.
Yeah, sequestration. It is the dumbest word.
Typical Washington world.
Yeah, of course it is.
I call it just forced discipline on spending. Is that what it is?
It's forced spending cuts that the President Obama proposed in the Budget Act a couple of years ago. And he proposed and pushed, frankly, and then signed into law this automatic spending cuts if the super committee that was an abrogation of congressional authority, if they didn't do their work. Well, guess what? They didn't do their work. We came up on the deadline, which was December 31st of last year. In the fiscal cliff deal, Congress pushed it off a few months. It's now March 1st, or a couple of months. So March 1st, there are $85 billion in automatic budget cuts if a new budget deal isn't done. Well, there won't be a new budget by March 1st. What there will be is a continuing resolution. There's another funny term. Continuing resolution is, this is how we've been budgeting for the last 4 years because the Senate won't ever pass a budget. And a continuing resolution just simply means that the law as it exists today is carried out through the end of the year.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Senator Hoeven as well, and we can Kevin can unpack the rest of this and answer the big question: can we afford it? Do we need it still? And it sounds like within the constraints of the Ryan budget, we do. Also, want to talk about Kevin's forum on gun control issues coming up on Friday. That's going to be fascinating as well. So that and more as we continue live from the Holiday Inn. Don't go away. All right, we're back. We're actually at the North Dakota Corn Growers annual meeting at the Fargo Holiday Inn. And there was a farm forum summit here about the farm bill that was actually Senator Hoeven and Senator Heitkamp and Congressman Cramer participated in. And everybody wants to know, is there going to be a farm bill and when will it be? And so, and there never is a farm bill on time ever, is there? I mean, that's sort of another Washington thing.
That's one of the rich traditions of Congress is that they pass a 5-year farm bill. On the 5th year, they start working on the next one. Then they don't get it done, so then they extend it for another year. So 5-year farm bills turn into 6-year farm bills, and it's a very rich tradition. It's not a new phenomenon, and that's exactly what we're dealing with now. We are now in the 6th year of last 5-year farm bill.
And you mentioned earlier the complication because of sequestration and the continuing resolution. But two terrible terms, which basically mean budget games in Washington are part of the problem.
That's right. Okay. That's right. But the farm bill, as proposed and passed by the Senate last year and proposed and passed by the House Ag Committee last year, do fit into the budget cuts required even through sequestration. There's plenty of room, even under the sequestration scenario and under the Ryan 10 or 20-year budget scenario. So the farm bill should not have a problem getting done and getting passed, certainly not as a result of sequestration. Now, I think what people need to understand about this sequestration, this automatic budget cut, across-board budget cut, do not fall for the scare tactics that the president is using. And I've been pretty kind to the president since being elected to Congress, but these stunts he pulls where he has a White House news conference with firemen and police officers, no doubt union members, saying that they're all going to be fired, and Tom Vilsack, the ag secretary, says we're going to fire meat inspectors if the Republicans do this. That's extortion.
Well, and plus it's so tired. I mean, they've been doing it forever.
But here's the deal, Scott. What we will do in the House when we pass the continuing resolution, that is, when we pass the authority to continue the current law through the end of the year, that is to say, existing law, not current law, existing law at any given time. That means even after sequestration, $85 billion in cuts. We will also pass what is called in Washingtonese reprogramming authority. Reprogramming authority is a fancy way for saying flexibility. We will give the Pentagon, the Ag Secretary, everybody else.
So in other words, if we took $10 out of your $1,000 budget,
that's right.
You can decide where the $10 comes from.
It doesn't have to come from the highest priorities. Now it's on the president to decide what the priorities are.
So you know what?
Not blame someone else.
I now like sequestration, even though it's the dumbest word in the world, because finally we have some fiscal discipline.
Let's put it into perspective. Sequestration is $85 billion worth of cuts the rest of the year, starting March 1st. That represents, imagine, now listen carefully, that represents 2% of the federal budget, half of which is defense spending. That means the rest is 1% of the federal budget. And our president thinks we need to raise taxes to cover that 1%.
Pathetic.
As opposed to finding a way to strategically, surgically cut 1%.
Yeah.
That's what we're up against.
Phenomenal. Yeah. And do you win?
I think yes, do we win? I believe we can win, Scott. But what it will take to win is that we don't have Barack Obama. We don't have the White House. We don't have the bully pulpit. We don't have CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC. But what we do have are, 230 some members of the House of Representatives, 40 some members of the United States Senate, several governors. We have got to go radio show by radio show, editorial board by editorial board, town hall by town hall, and explain what this is. We are talking about 2% of the federal budget totally that will be affected on March 1st.
In a country that's broke.
In a country that's got a $16.5 trillion debt and growing. But if you don't believe that a $16.5 trillion debt that exceeds the productivity of your economy, if you don't think that's a problem, then you have a different perspective. Our president doesn't think that's a problem. I happen to think it's a big problem. If you don't believe me, ask the people of Greece.
Well, to me, the audacity of this, no pun intended, the title of his book, is the fact that this guy invented sequestration. I mean, he's the one that brought it up and said, Harry Reid, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, he invented it, he pushed for it, and he signed it into law.
Yeah, and now it's
he's appalled by it.
Yeah, now it's somehow a bad idea. But that again, when you have the bully pulpit, when you have the media, that's ultimately a game you can play.
But I'm an eternal optimist, Scott. I think we can get all this done. I think there is momentum in Washington to do the right thing. I'm part of a bipartisan group of freshman members, 30-some members, who have signed a letter of statement of principles that went to the President of the United States, went to Speaker Boehner, Minority Leader Pelosi, saying, we're all concerned. We're asking you to get your act together. If not, let us do it as a coalition that thinks that this is important. We need to get to spending cuts. We need a pro-growth, flatter tax policy. We can change this country and this economy.
What amazes me is quite honestly, what he's fighting for is more of the same that has not worked. It's not worked.
Well, if stimulus spending and more government spending worked, we'd be huge, wouldn't we? We wouldn't have a $16.5 trillion debt. We'd probably have a budget surplus.
So there's part of me that says, you know what, throw him the keys, but unfortunately, there's so much damage that's done from that.
That's the problem, Scott. Believe me, there is a school of thought, and a growing one in some respects in Washington among Republicans, that, hey, let's give the American people what they've asked for. Elections have consequences. The problem with that is that while we may only be 1/3 of the government, we are 1/3 of the government in the House of Representatives. We are the only thing that stands between the United States of America being what we once knew it to be, or becoming Spain or Greece. And we all have children and grandchildren, and we don't want to leave them a country that's bankrupt.
Kevin's agreed to stay in the next segment. We're still waiting for Senator John Hoeven, too, who is still in this farm bill forum. Just briefly, tell us about what you're planning for Friday on this hot topic of gun control.
Well, I'm starting a series of what I'm calling American Issues Forums. And they are forums, while they're sort of town halls, they're also designed to have some experts around the table with various viewpoints. After the Sandy Hook elementary tragedy, obviously it was an opportunity to pause and consider violence in our country. A lot of people use that opportunity, including our president, to push a political agenda. There's too many political agendas being pushed, too much yelling at each other in Washington. And I've said, well, let's have a national discussion, a conversation, not a screaming match, that discusses all of the aspects of violence in our country, all the possible causes, including a culture of life or the abandonment of it, the culture of the family, culture of violence in Hollywood and television, video games, abandoning of children by fathers, in addition to
our culture, basically,
our culture, basically. So I'm calling it a discussion on violence, guns, and culture. We're going to talk about guns. We're going to have people that oppose gun rights. We're going to have people that support gun rights. We're also going to have educators, law enforcement. Now, I don't know what side of the aisle, they are on in the gun debate, but we're going to have Tom Fryer from the North Dakota Family Alliance to talk about the family and the breakdown of the family. What are the statistics? What are the consequences? Is that part of it here? So, I think we're going to have a good cross section of people to sit around and talk about it and see what we can learn. And maybe we'll learn that the problem isn't in Washington. Who knows?
By the way, that's Friday.
Friday at 2:00. I'm sorry.
It's Friday morning.
Friday morning at 9:00 at the Doublewood Inn in Fargo.
And we plan on broadcasting on live if you're all right with that.
Great. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, but we'll take that event live because I think that'll be fascinating. And there's a lot of folks that'll be testifying, and the public's welcome to that.
The public is welcome and encouraged, regardless of your view.
Right.
Come and share it with me.
All right. Senator Hoeven will join us too coming up. We're live at the North Dakota Corn Growers Annual Meeting, Fargo Holiday Inn on the Common Sense Club. Don't touch that dial. We're at the North Dakota Actually, I was going to say North Dakota Farm Bureau, great organization. We're actually at the North Dakota Corn Growers and their annual meeting at the Fargo Holiday Inn. And we're joined by now the senior member of the North Dakota Congressional Delegation. Oh, I love saying that. You can't believe how much I love saying that. Senator John Hoeven, and Congressman Kevin Cramer stays with us as well. Senator, nice to see you.
Great to see you, Scott.
How you been?
Good. You're making me sound kind of old there with a.
No, you are now.
I know.
He's the big man on campus for North
what
Dakota.
Can I say?
What a sea change we have in North Dakota politics.
It's good to be here with you and with Kevin. And
how's he doing?
Great. I tell you what, he already seemingly knows everybody, and it's just great working with him. It really is.
So you just came off a Farm Bill forum here with the corn growers. Let's talk Farm Bill first. Are we going to get one soon?
I think we'll get one this year. There's no reason to hold up. I've been pushing our Ag Chairman, Senator Stabenow from Michigan, and the ranking members, Senator Cochran from Mississippi, and say, let's get into committee. They're telling me we'll be in committee in March, in the Ag Committee, marking up the bill. Let's get it to the floor. Let's be the first bill to get through the Senate floor and get some momentum, get it over to the Senate, or to the House, excuse me.
I'm hearing from a lot of folks who say, this country's broke. Maybe it's time to do things differently. Maybe we can't afford to do a farm bill like we've done in the past. What do you say to folks? And a lot of folks say, because of all the expensing of heavy equipment, that a lot of these growers, after great years, are actually not even paying much in the way of income taxes. So do they need it to, quote unquote, to survive? What would you say to that?
Last year we wrote a good farm bill. It focused on crop insurance. So not only does it do a good job for our farmers and ranchers, and all Americans benefit from the highest quality, lowest cost food supply, but we also save $23 billion. If we do that across government, we go a long way to fixing this debt and deficit the right way. Because remember, it's both about reducing spending, but growing the economy so you get revenue from growth, not higher taxes. And that's the biggest disagreement we have with the administration.
And you mentioned, Kevin, earlier, it's already into the framework of the Ryan budget, which, right? I mean, that's pretty significant.
Well, right. And John's point is if every agency in every budget did what these guys have done with the Farm Bill in the 112th, boy, we'd be on our way to a much more secure future.
So let's talk a little bit about the real battle right now, and that's over the forced cuts. Does anybody even know what sequestration means, by the way? I hope the word's banished from the dictionary. I mean, it's
really what it means is across-the-board reductions, and what we're trying to do is provide more flexibility to the administration to do it. And so the real question is going to be, will the administration work with us? We're willing to provide more flexibility. We're saying, let's do it. And I hope the administration will join with us. We're also pushing for real reforms, and that's what needs to be done. Pro-growth tax reform, not higher taxes. Simplify the code. We need to get into entitlement reform, and we need to find savings, real reductions. And we can do that, but the administration's got to join us. And it's going to be interesting to see here if the administration will join us on more flexibility as we address sequestration.
What gives you any even flint of hope that you're going to have an administration that's going to work with you? Have they given any sign that they were going to work with Republicans on anything?
Well, we'll see if they do, but that's what they need to do for the American people.
I mean, what is your sense, Kevin? I mean, is there a new attitude in Washington?
I don't know that there's so much a new attitude as there is a new sort of resolve on our side to put the onus on the president. And I think this flexibility that Senator Hoeven talks about is exactly that. Because it says, look, you can stand up there with firefighters standing behind you and say they're all going to be fired if Republicans don't pass my tax increases. But at the end of the day, if we give him the flexibility, then the onus is on him to decide who gets fired or what gets cut.
I love that idea. And is that what you mean when you say real reforms? When you're
Well, I mean more than, I mean flexibility, but then also really reforming our government programs to find savings, just like we're doing in the Farm Bill. That's $23 billion in real savings. That's more than the sequester. The sequester is $16 billion. Yeah. We're going beyond that, but we're reforming the program so we have a better program and we have real savings to help with the deficit.
But the scare tactics are photo ops with firemen and meat inspectors, right? And saying these guys are gone if those evil Republicans get their way. What I think I've heard you say, Kevin, and Senator Hoeven, is that, look, if there's $1,000 budget and they're cutting $10, we're going to let them cut $10 where they need to cut $10. We're not going to tell them where they have to cut.
That's right.
Yeah. That's it.
So, and how do you do that? So that if you do that, you remove his argument. Does that have to be passed too?
Look, governors across this country are doing it, have done it. My second year in office as governor, I had to go in and find reductions in every single budget. And that was 2002. We had to do it. We did it. People forget that because then as we built the economy and you get growth, you get job creation, you get a growing revenue base, not higher taxes. You reduce the tax rates, but you get more revenue from growth. That's the part that the administration just doesn't see and won't join with us in accomplishing.
But technically, as sequestration was passed, it targeted where the cuts were, right? Are you saying you fixed it by giving the flexibility?
No, sequestration is basically across the board. The problem is that it puts more of the cuts on defense. In other words, it's across the board for discretionary spending, okay? But defense takes 50% of those reductions, but defense is not 50% of discretionary spending. So essentially it's across the board. That still gives the administration a fair amount of flexibility as to where they do it, but we're willing to provide even more so they can truly prioritize, cut the things where there's waste, fraud, or abuse, but keep the essential things like firemen and meat inspectors. And that's exactly what we're willing to do. The question is, will the president engage in that process?
Okay, does that mean there would be less cuts to defense is what I'm getting at?
Well, I don't know if there'd be less cuts to defense, but it would give the Secretary of Defense the freedom to cut where there might be some fat. I don't think there's anybody that thinks that there's not some. Right. So it gives him the opportunity to set the priorities, fund the priorities, cut for the bottom part of the priorities, and when we get to these long-term things that the senator's talking about, like in the House, the goal is a balanced budget in 10 years. That's going to be aggressive, but with the fiscal cliff deal, the trajectory toward that is lower. It is possible. Maybe we compromise and it's 14 or 12 or 20. I don't know what it is. But when we get those long-term reforms, then I think we have the opportunity to come back to the discretionary side of the budget and take another look. But let's face it, the real savings are not in the discretionary side of the budget.
Right. Do you put those reforms in some sort of compromise with sequestration, or are you staging the Senator?
We are trying to get to the reforms, but the president is saying he will not engage in reforms without a tax increase.
Right.
And we're saying no. We're saying no to the tax increase. You get your revenue from economic growth, not higher taxes. Higher taxes hurts our economy at a time when we have 12 million people out of work and we have an economy that's stagnant.
But he's going to say, I just won an election. We had that debate. I won. How do you get him off that broken record?
He got $600 billion when he forced the taxes higher on upper income individuals. For him to come back now and demand more tax increases I just don't think. Not only do the American people not support it, but it would hurt our economy. We'd end up with less revenue because you don't get the economic growth.
We have a short time left. I mean, do you guys lay your head at pillow at night thinking this can be done, or is this just a fool's errand here?
Again, the president's got to lead. It absolutely can be done. We're ready to do it, but the president has got to join in the process. And the next test will be, in the immediate term, will he agree to flexibility so you can make spending reductions where they should be made? He has the opportunity to step up. We'll see if he does.
Listen, he's a second-term president. At the beginning of the second term, he has a little bit of momentum, but that momentum wanes pretty quickly in politics. If you study political history, you know that he quickly becomes a lame duck. And so
that's our only hope, really.
Does that have some role? Perhaps. But the real thing is John Hoeven, Kevin Cramer, and every other member of Congress going into their states and districts telling this story.
Glad you're doing
often,
it.
Because we need a counterpoint.
And help them back them up, folks. Take their back because they're out there with a good fight. Thanks, guys. Glad you're there.